Hello and welcome to a bonus episode of Anthology presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. If this is your first time listening, Anthology is a podcast exploring science fiction anthology storytelling during television's first golden age, beginning with The Twilight Zone. But in honor of Black Mirror's new season that premiered on Netflix on October 21st, I'm covering each episode of Charlie Brooker's technophobic sci-fi anthology series in this bonus episode series. You can find more of Anthology at anthologypod.com, and if you want to contact me, you can use the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod. You can tweet me at ObsessiveViewer, send an email to matt@obsessiveviewer.com, or call and leave me a voicemail at 317-762-6099. If you like what you hear and you want to support the podcast, the easiest way to do that is to head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review. The more ratings and reviews I get, the easier it will be for people to find the show in iTunes' search results. And I believe you can also leave a review on Stitcher Radio if you use that. And I want to say TuneIn as well, but I'm not sure. And finally, if you want to show your support with your wallet, it is kind of the holiday season. If you want to help support the show, you can do that by clicking the donate button on anthologypod.com or the donate link in the show notes of this episode. Any donations made will help pay the fees to keep the podcast running and is incredibly appreciated. And also the show notes of this episode can be found at anthologypod.com/bonus11. Today on the show, I'll be discussing San Junipero. It's the fourth episode of Black Mirror's third season, and the plot summary, courtesy of IMDb, is as follows. In a seaside town in 1987, a shy young woman and an outgoing party girl strike up a powerful bond that seems to defy the laws of space and time. So yeah, before I get into the talent rundown and everything, just real quick, two things. One, there's going to be spoilers galore in this episode, so I'm going to be spoiling the entire episode of San Junipero, so if you haven't watched it yet, go check it out on Netflix and then come back and listen. And the other thing is, I found out after rewatching the episode that they actually released the soundtrack for it, the score of it from Clint Mansell. It's available on iTunes, and I got it on Amazon Music, and God, it's so good. I'll talk about it in the review, but I wanted to kind of give that PSA because they did also release the one for Nosedive, and I think that those are the only two soundtracks that they've released, I believe at least, but yeah, I'm glad that they're at least doing that. So San Junipero stars Gugu Mbatha Raw, which I'm sure I completely butchered that pronunciation. She plays Kelly. She was previously in the movies Concussion, Free State of Jones, Jupiter Ascending, and next up is she's going to be in God Particle, which is the next Cloverfield movie, but they just announced that they're releasing a new Cloverfield movie later next year, and I believe that they're taking God Particle off of the slate. So I'm not sure what the deal is with God Particle, the movie, but she's attached to be in it, and everything is so mysterious at Bad Robot that it's kind of hard to ascertain, but yeah, so coming up, she's got God Particle. Co-starring as Yorkie is Mackenzie Davis. She was previously in The Martian, and she is also in the AMC TV show Halt and Catch Fire. And she was also in a couple of movies that I'm going to go ahead and just say I'm fans of. That Awkward Moment, the kind of guy-centric rom-com with Zac Efron, Michael B. Jordan, and Miles Teller. I'm an unabashed fan of the romantic comedy genre, so I liked that movie, and she's in it, so there's a plus there. And she was also in a rom-com that I wasn't too crazy about with Daniel Radcliffe, called What If, and it was okay, it was serviceable. Writer for this episode was Charlie Brooker, and he this was the first episode of season 3 that he wrote, I believe, in terms of the production order and everything. And director for this episode is Owen Harris. He actually previously directed the episode Be Right Back with Donald Gleason and Haley Atwell, which was also a very emotionally driven story about a relationship at its core. So my initial thoughts on San Junipero is the first time I watched it, it's actually been a few weeks, several weeks since I saw this episode for the first time, and I came away from it feeling like this was a pretty strong contender for my favorite Black Mirror episode yet. It's a beautiful story that deals with a lot of human emotions, and I felt like there was a ton of complexity to Yorkie and Kelly's relationship, and I really loved the way that they developed those characters throughout the episode. And even though in that first viewing, this is all stuff I'm going to get to in my review, but even though it was pretty clear early on that it was a simulation and that I figured out pretty early on that they're actually elderly in real life, it didn't detract from just an overall really beautiful story with really engaging characters. So, having said that, it's been a few weeks since I saw the episode for the first time, or it's been several weeks, and I have kind of put off rewatching it for this bonus episode of Anthology. And the reason is because this was such an emotional journey, and I kind of put it off because I was not scared of having those, like, having emotional reactions to it again, but I didn't want to be confronted by having such a strong emotional response to it. This isn't like, I wasn't like bawling my eyes out or anything, but just the characterization in the story is so beautiful and so great that I was hesitant I put off watching it with a closer eye because I wanted to preserve that initial viewing experience in my mind as much as I could, if that makes sense. And I'm glad to say that rewatching it for this episode, for this podcast, it didn't tarnish it at all. It was just as good as before. So, I was happy about that. So, watching it a second time and experiencing it, knowing everything for sure that's going to happen in it, opening our first introduction to San Junipero with Heaven is a Place on Earth playing in a car radio was just fantastic. It's a beautiful detail, and bringing us into this environment that is so detailed in San Junipero. Everything is so ultra glossy and flashy, and all the detail to the structures and the set design for all of the scenes is really, really detailed and flashy, and it's really well done. And since it's Black Mirror, you know that something about it is off, so it's not authentically the 1980s, but just seeing how everything is designed in the episode is just, it really brings you into this world in a really visual way. I really enjoyed the way that everything was set up and shown to us. And just the idea of a 1980s episode of Black Mirror is so cool. It's such a cool thing to do, because Black Mirror is so renowned and known for showing our near future. And it kind of seems like, I don't remember if Charlie Brooker said this in an interview or something, or I just imagined it, but it kind of feels like someone said, hey, make a period piece episode, make a period episode of Black Mirror. And it feels like Charlie Brooker is just like, challenge accepted. I'll do it. It's just a really unique twist on what we could expect from a Black Mirror episode. Not that there is much that we can expect from Black Mirror at this point, because we do have different types of episodes. We have the futuristic episodes, and we have the kind of more contemporary episodes that are more about things going on with the characters. I'm thinking of Shut Up and Dance and the National Anthem. So this isn't a break from the norm in the traditional sense of a TV show, doing something different. It's just a break from the things that we've come to expect from the show, which I guess is the exact same thing as being a break from the norm. But there are so many different norms in Black Mirror that it's interesting to see this new twist on what could be expected. And right off the bat, I'm noticing that Yorkie is dressed very conservatively. She's very normally dressed, in contrast to the very flashy and absurd way that the other people in the club are dressed and everything. And one of the things I really liked about this introduction to it is we see the different social aspects of it. So she's in the arcade section, and the guy starts talking to her, and he seems very timid and shy, and she seems pleasant, but she's not engaged with him. Like she's a pleasant person, but she's not blowing him off because this is new to her. This is a new experience, and he seems very timid and very awkward. And he has this icebreaker about the game that she's playing having two different endings depending on if you're playing one player or two player. And I mean, that's just on the surface. That's a good like icebreaker scene because it feels very natural to have that kind of scene play out, that kind of social scene play out where this guy's hitting on this girl essentially in a club, only to be shot down. That's a very natural icebreaker, but I couldn't help but think that it reminds me of what Charlie Brooker had said about wanting playtests to be different on repeat viewings and have different having it set up through Netflix to have some kind of different experience depending on how you watch it, or having it like a nightmare mode, I think is how he described it. And I kind of wonder if he laid that dialogue into San Junipero just as kind of a little wink at it, thinking that they would be able to work out the logistics of that for playtest, but it didn't pan out. So it's not distracting or anything. It's just something that I felt I would highlight here in this episode. And I really hope that they at some point do something like that. I think that could be really cool if they could have a different experience on different viewings through Netflix. I think that would be really cool. And going back to kind of the social aspect of this episode, it's really fun and interesting. It's a night out in a party town, so people are meeting one another and bumping into each other's lives. It's just a really cool social experience here. To kind of bring us into it. It's a good way to kind of get us to the tone of the episode, or the tone of the setting, rather. And then Kelly rejecting Wes outside of the club is kind of an extension of that. And that's where we get kind of our first clue that that things aren't as they seem in San Junipero, because Wes says that we have a couple hours. And I mean, that's fine. I like that they laid that groundwork there. It kind of hits a bit of a redundant point later on in the episode that I'll get to, but I like that they have that scene because it's our introduction to Kelly, and it kind of hints at some of her, not behavior, but her personality within San Junipero. And then Yorkie talking to the guy in the arcade, and then her seeing the car crash on the game, and that completely derailing the encounter, and her like leaving at that moment. There's a lot there because it hints at her backstory, and it's also another example of the social aspect of this episode, because the guy that she's talking to just seems, it's a very genuine way that he beats himself up over it after she blows him off, because he doesn't know anything about her, or he doesn't know what set her off on that reaction. He thinks that it appears that he thinks that he did it himself, and that he's just not. It seems like he's internalizing it, and it's a major blow to his ego. And this is all intercut between Kelly and Yorkie, Kelly outside of the club, and Kelly mentions to Wes that she just has this offhand remark saying, "Do I have to red light you?" Which reminded me of the blocking technology in the Christmas special. And also around the same time in the scene in the actual club, the bartender, someone says that he's blonde, and he says, "I'm blonde," and that made me wonder how it all works. It made me wonder if does he work for the company, or is he someone who, like, his lifelong dream was to be a bartender in a club, or maybe he was, and that's what he's reliving. That would actually make more sense, that he used to be one, and that he's reliving the glory days. or his prime years, essentially. But that kind of left some questions for me. But it's not anything that's ruinous to the episode or anything. If anything, it's good set decoration and good. It's something to ponder rather than nitpick. And speaking of nitpicking, not really nitpicking, but that's a terrible segue. But Kelly, when Kelly and Yorkie are talking, first of all, they're meet cute, where Kelly finds Yorkie to kind of get Wes away from her, and then we get that I'm all over the place. I'm so sorry. We get her saying that Yorkie has 6 months to live, and then Yorkie says, I think she says 5 months to live. And that's so dark when you watch it again, because you know what's really going on with them. But the way that the encounter plays out is such a classic, like, meet cute thing in like a romantic comedy or romantic drama. It's a really strong way for them to get together and to have that have us connect with them as a couple early on. And then Kelly comments on everyone's attire in the club and how everyone is dressed very loudly and very 80s, and how she says people try so hard to look how they think they should. And I think that that's a really interesting, because these people are in this world, in San Junipero, and it's something that's expanded upon later in the episode, but they're there so that they can experience a time or experience a youth that they no longer have. And them trying so hard to look how they think they should because of the era or what have you, is them escaping from their real life. And that's why Yorkie's attire, her clothing are so true to her, because she's experiencing this for the first time, essentially. I'll get to that in a bit, but it's just a really interesting comment from Kelly that she's pointing out how everyone is trying really hard to create that 80s feel. And when she gets excited about wanting to dance, like, her excitement is so infectious. It's like, I don't know, she screams and she jumps up, and then she pulls Yorkie to the dance floor. I think that it was just really infectious. Like, it made me really excited. Like, I was really happy. Yeah, and I think that that's the perfect counterbalance to Yorkie's ultra shy, conservative persona, that she's very reserved. And it's important, or it's nice that she's not like completely turned off by Kelly. She's not like, oh, this crazy party girl is trying to persuade me into her party girl lifestyle. It's more that Kelly is intrigued by her, or I'm sorry, Yorkie is intrigued by Kelly, and it's like Kelly is unlocking feelings in Yorkie that she doesn't know how to process, because she's never, I don't know if it would be fair to say she's never had to process it, but if she has, it's been over 40 years since she's had to process those feelings. So this is all new to her, and it's really great. That scene is just really fantastic. And it's why the relationship that forms between the two of them feels so genuine. They're not necessarily like complete opposites, but they have very different. They're very much driven in different ways, and their drives in San Junipero are both based on their emotional history. And I love that they find each other and they come together in such a great way. Because of that. And the conflict that comes up at the end of the episode between them is a reflection of how different they are from one another. And that's what makes the entire story of Kelly and Yorkie really, really, really remarkable and really easy to latch onto from an emotional perspective. And then this night in San Junipero kind of ends with Kelly propositioning Yorkie, because she runs out of the club because she was afraid that people were staring at her. And the dialogue in this scene, oh my God, it's so great. I so great. Why did I say it's I so great? It's so great because when Kelly asks Yorkie if she wants to go home with her, Yorkie says, "I never did anything like that." And I love that line because it's subtly hinting at the truth of what's going on in San Junipero and the truth of these characters, but it's said in such a way that you don't really register it, that she's saying "I never did," or she's saying "I never did anything like that" instead of "I've never done anything like that." And it also has kind of a more depressing undertone to it because Yorkie already thinks of her life as over. And I mean, at this point in her life in the real world, it is, she's at the end of her life. And this being her first night in San Junipero, it's like waking up in a new world for her. And that's something that really came through to me in a big way with Mackenzie Davis's performance. I thought that it was just spectacular. And I didn't mention this before, but this episode is broken up into little segments, or nights in San Junipero, essentially. So the next one is we get this marker on the screen saying 1 week later. And we see Yorkie trying on different styles. And going back to what Kelly said earlier in the episode, it just reveals more about her character and how she's processing things, or how she thinks she should not perform, but should act or appear in San Junipero. And Yorkie eventually comes to the decision that she wants to dress more like herself. And it's really interesting because this scene where she's trying on different outfits and different styles, it's interesting to me because San Junipero isn't about experiencing different things that you missed out on, or different time periods of your life. It's not about that for Yorkie specifically. Because of Yorkie's circumstances, where she was in a car accident when she was 21 and had never had has never had a full life, essentially. What San Junipero is for Yorkie is that it's about finding out who she is, because she never got that opportunity in her real life. And it's really great that they show this scene, even though they've already pinpointed that, yeah, okay, Yorkie is dressed very plainly, in contrast to everyone else in San Junipero, but they still put this scene in because it shows that this is her experiencing her life, rather than reliving her prime years in San Junipero. And then the next scene, this is what I was talking about. This is probably one of the only issues I have with the episode is that Wes was trying to get with Kelly again. They're outside, they're kind of in an alleyway, and they're talking about Wes is trying to get her to have sex with him again. And the scene itself just didn't work for me that much. For starters, it's redundant. We've already seen Wes trying to get with Kelly. Kelly's already threatened him, already gotten away from him. That really should be all that we need the Wes character for. Granted, we will see him again in the Quagmire later in the episode, but this scene could be lifted right out because we've already seen her reject him, and we've already seen her use him to meet Yorkie. Like, that served that purpose. Here, he's just trying to get with her, and it's more of a wink to the audience. And unfortunately, his dialogue kind of completely spills the beans on the episode, for me at least. Kelly says that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of women in San Junipero, and to that, Wes says, the locals, they're like dead people. But the way that he puts the emphasis on the word dead, I think he says it like, they're like dead people. instead of saying like they're like dead people. It's a very small nitpick here, but the way that he says it just made me think like, oh, maybe they are actually dead people. That's weird. It's just the delivery of it was just terrible for me, and that really just showed the hand of the episode for me. And then to make matters even worse, in the very next line, he says, "I don't want some boring romance, okay? Like Jesus, put us in a retirement home deal." Like that. Like I'd already been signaled that the people in San Junipero, the locals, are dead people. Like that just seemed, that first viewing when I watched it, I was like, oh, that's what it is. That's what's going on. And then he says that, and I hear retirement home deal, and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if if this is all a simulation for old people in a retirement home. And I don't know, just that whole dialogue, that whole scene just seems like way too much of a wink to the audience, and it just telegraphed too much about the episode for me, and the story. But that's not to say that it's a bad thing, that at least that the concept of San Junipero is a bad thing. In fact, when I heard that line and when I started putting that together in my head, I immediately thought, man, I hope that's what San Junipero is. Like, I got actually prepared to be upset if that wasn't where the episode was leading. And I was going to be very disappointed. Like, I remember specifically thinking, it sucks because if it turns out to be something else, I'm always going to have that thought in my head as a better alternative, because I couldn't think of a scenario that would be better than the one that I had conjured up because of that line. Fortunately, that is what happens, but it's also a bummer that they had to put in that line, and it kind of spoiled it for me, essentially. And I think that it's definitely a problem that the scene itself is redundant, and it stood out to me even before I knew what was really going on. Like I said, that first viewing is all in that scene. That's where it showed its hand. And watching it again for a second time, like, that scene stands out even more. And I feel like every time I revisit it, it's going to stand out even more. It's going to stick out. And then in the actual club, we get the song Living in a Box. I think that's the name of it. I don't know, but that's just what the lyrics are. And I thought that was a nice touch. All the music in this episode is a nice touch, all the licensed music. And Kelly's in the club talking to a guy, and he mentions, I never got this song, kind of weird. And I don't know, I thought that was a cute wink to the audience, I guess. So I want to kind of highlight the technical aspect of this episode, and that the camera work, essentially. I really love the way that the camera moves in this episode, and I love how they found ways to show how isolated and alone Yorkie is when she's in the middle of a crowded club. Like, there's a scene where she's sitting alone, sipping a drink, and like everyone in the background is dancing, having a great time, but she is sitting alone on this little couch in the club, and she's like perfectly center. So you see there's empty space to her left and right, and she's just slowly sipping this drink, kind of looking around and seeing or watching Kelly. And then as the camera moves in, it cuts between that and then back to Kelly, who's talking to the really boring guy. And just that visual symmetry, that showing, cutting back and forth between these two characters in these two situations in the same club, it really helps grow the connection between them, and it really makes you yearn for them to get together and to be together. And in this case, Kelly is playing hard to get, and Yorkie just doesn't know how to work that. She doesn't know what to do. And at that point, Yorkie makes a decision to go with her into the bathroom, and just basically tell her that she doesn't know what to do, and asks her to guide her. And I thought that was a really sweet moment, and it showed the vulnerability of Yorkie in a really great way, for her to want to experience or have this opportunity to experience this time with Kelly, but she's not completely helpless. Like she knows that she doesn't have the life experience to really know how to interact with Kelly in this scenario, but she's assertive enough that she's asking her to help her. And at that moment, it kind of made me wonder if that was the moment when Kelly accepts her and takes her home with her. It kind of made me wonder if at that moment we're meant to think that Kelly is more compassionate toward Yorkie, or if Kelly is, or if maybe Kelly has seen this sort of still closeted attraction before. At this point in the story, Kelly is obviously attracted to Yorkie, but I was wondering if they were on the same wavelength emotionally, or if at that point Yorkie is still just kind of a conquest for Kelly. And I think that that's kind of answered later, is that after they hook up, I think that that's when Kelly starts to feel an emotional connection with Yorkie, and that's when she opens up. But before they actually do that, when they go back to Yorkie, or to Kelly's beach house, for all the times, or for the couple times with Wes where they wink at the audience about it, in a kind of an overt way, or in a way that tips the hand a little bit, there is a scene where, like, between Yorkie and Kelly that conceals it well. Like, I'm thinking there's a scene when they go back to Kelly's where Yorkie is looking at a picture of a woman that Kelly has framed on the bedside table, and it just says "Happy Birthday, Allison," and it's a woman, and Yorkie just says, "Is this your mother?" And what I love about that is Kelly just starts kissing her instead of answering her. And I thought that was a great misdirect for the audience. That's a great way to do that, because it's not shown as a mysterious thing, like, oh, who's this mysterious woman in this picture? It's just that Yorkie is anxious, or that she is nervous, and she's, trying to have an icebreaker, and Kelly is just trying to push herself forward, or push the relationship forward, since Yorkie isn't able to. I thought that was a really great way to mislead or misdirect the audience, while still kind of signaling to us that there's something amiss with San Junipero from us. And then after they've slept together, Kelly starts revealing her backstory to Yorkie, and this is the moment where her attraction for Yorkie becomes real, for us at least. And I love the way that the dialogue conceals the truth of everything. It's filled with, like, these double meanings that could be applied to the real world or the San Junipero world. So she says that she talks about her husband and that she loved him and he chose not to stick around. And then she says that now it's me and I'm passing through, and before I leave, I'm going to have a good time. And that just sums up the character of Kelly so well. And it's really great characterization, and it comes from a place of such honest emotion, and the performance in that scene is just spectacular. I loved it. And I love that it served the double purpose of also concealing the truth of what's going on. And it also made me wonder, like, Kelly is this character who, up to this point, we kind of think, well, she's had, she's had her bisexuality, like she's lived her life as a party girl, and she's had this, she knows what it's like to be with a woman and be with a man and everything in a way that Yorkie doesn't know, or at least she doesn't know how to be with a woman. But it also kind of reveals that this scene, this backstory reveals that Kelly also you kind of imagine or assume that she's also kind of repressed her bisexuality because she was in this long-term monogamous heterosexual relationship. And it's just interesting to me that they're kind of coming from the same place. in terms of their history, somewhat. It's a loose connection, obviously, because they're coming from very different backgrounds. But in terms of exploring their, in Kelly's case, bisexuality, and in Yorkie's case, homosexuality, it's just interesting that they've never. It's interesting that San Junipero is an experience for them to really explore their sexuality in ways that they never could throughout their life. So we get another break where we see 1 week later, and Kelly is nowhere to be found. And this is so true to that character, and it's such a great way to introduce conflict in a genuine and organic way. Yorkie is looking all over the place for Kelly, but she can't find her, and she gets tipped off that she's at the quagmire. So she goes to the quagmire to search for her, and you can feel just how tense and somewhat dangerous Yorkie feels when she's in the quagmire. And even though this is San Junipero and you don't really have, there's not really a threat there. Granted, if you're watching for the first time, that's not really a it doesn't really track that it's not threatening to her, essentially. Like, she's not, when watching for the first time, you wouldn't think that she's not in any danger. That's a really convoluted way of saying it. Watching for the first time, you believe that she is in danger. But watching on repeat viewings, when you know how the story works out and you know how San Junipero works, even though she's not in any physical danger per se, you still feel how tense and dangerous the situation is that she's in. And I just love the design of the quagmire, because it's in such stark contrast to what we've seen throughout the whole episode. It's not this glossy, fun 80s aesthetic. It's this edgier, like grungy 80s kind of Mad Max style thing, and it's really great how they have those two contrasts in it, in the different areas of San Junipero. I like that a lot. And then we get Yorkie meeting Wes there, and we kind of get this not exposition dump, but, well, I guess sort of an exposition dump. We get this a reveal of the true character of Kelly, or really what she does in San Junipero and how that affects other people, and why she's running away from Yorkie in such a way. And we get confirmation in that scene that this is some sort of simulation, because Wes says, again, Wes kind of just showing the audience what's going on. He says that maybe she's in a different time period, like the 90s. Which I don't know. Well, I can't say for certain, but I feel like this is the closest we'll get to like a time travel episode of Black Mirror. Although technically, I guess the time dilation thing and the eggs and the Christmas special kind of worked that way. But I think this is the closest we'll get to an actual time travel episode. But I love it. I love it for that either way. And somewhat as a surprise, we get another break to another week later, this time in a different font. I like that we get this sequence where we're hopping through time with Yorkie as she's searching for Kelly. And for me personally, I'm 30 years old. When I saw the 90s, I freaking loved it. The Scream poster, in place of where the Lost Boys was in the 80s, I loved that so much. 'Cause Scream for me, in slight tangent, Scream for me is one of my favorite movies. It's like the movie that I watched when I was a little too young for it, and just it made me love movies, or it made me want to love movies the way that the characters loved movies. So it kind of, I credit Scream with putting me on a path that eventually led me to do podcasts about movies and TV. But anyway, in the sequence when Yorkie is searching high and low for Kelly, I love the music that plays. It's in the soundtrack. It's a Clint Mansell score, and the music that's playing is so ethereal and otherworldly, and it really hammers home how alone Yorkie feels as she's searching for Kelly. And you kind of get this emotional pain that she's feeling because she's been rejected by someone that she cared about. And then we get a jump to the early 2000s, and we see, like, instead of Scream or the Lost Boys, it's the Bourne Identity, better games in the arcade, and then DDR, Dance Dance Revolution, and she finally finds her playing a game with the guy from before, and they get this conversation between them. They have this conversation in the bathroom, or this argument where Yorkie says, "You don't know what this means," and Kelly kind of looks around and says, "This," like referring to San Junipero, "means fun," and those lines, that's such a succinct and perfect summation of their opposing viewpoints, and I loved it. I loved that because it really hammers home exactly what the difference between these characters mean to one another. And then we get this very Twilight Zone-esque moment when Kelly punches the mirror and shatters the glass, and then she looks down and sees that her hand has not been injured at all, and then looks up to see a clean mirror that's not been broken. And like that just evoked such a Twilight Zone feel to me. I don't know if it resonated in that way with other people, but I just definitely got a Twilight Zone vibe out of that. And I loved it. And that kind of leads to the rooftop scene, which you kind of get this fear that Yorkie is going to jump and, quote unquote, kill herself. And that's when Kelly really opens up, and says that she doesn't want to like anyone. And she has the very authentic concern that she doesn't know how much time there is. And just the emotion in that scene and in this episode overall is just so visceral and so great. It's really amazing. And they kind of reach this point where they decide to be together, and they're together in that moment, and that's when the conflict of their relationship is resolved, and then that brings us to them having conflicting viewpoints about if they should stay in San Junipero or die. And first of all, I just love the plotting of this episode. Nothing about it is drawn out, and each turn of the plot feels just very organic, and nothing overstays its welcome. I mean, we get Kelly and Yorkie getting together, and then we're introduced to what will become the conflict between them, and whether they should stay or pass on. And in between those two things, we get Kelly running away from Yorkie because she's afraid of how much she cares for her. It's just the way that everything is plotted and comes together is really fantastic. And Yorkie has this really subtle naivete that feels just so authentic and true to her character and her character's history. Because she says, I think in that moment she says that she doesn't understand why anyone wouldn't want to pass on or wouldn't want to stay in San Junipero. And it's just, that's laying the breadcrumbs for their big fight at the end. And I think that that's just so in keeping with what Yorkie's character is, and her character history points toward. Because she is, because she experienced her accident when she was at a young age. She's 21. She doesn't have the life experience that Kelly does. And again, Clint Mansell's score, there's the scene when Kelly tells Yorkie that she wants to visit her in the real world. I believe the track is Waves Crashing on Distant Shores of Time, by Clint Mansell. It's beautiful. It's so perfect. And that's when we get our first transition from San Junipero to the real world. And there's the scene that cuts to the real world. There's a shot that it fades to black and then opens up to white, and the shot is of a nurse's hand as Kelly is about to take it in real life to guide her to the car to go to Yorkie. And I feel like that scene, the way that it's composed, your Kelly's hand and figure is out of focus, and we're focused solely on the hand of the nurse. I feel like the way that is done, I feel like the imagery makes us think that we're seeing a child wandering through a field about to grab an adult's hand for guidance. I have no idea if that's intentional or if I'm just simply projecting, but that's kind of what I felt when I first saw that moment, that scene, that shot. It just kind of evoked youth into it, into the scene. It made me think of youth in a way that if the show was intending that, it did it really well. And it's kind of in keeping with the themes of the episode as well. So I thought that was kind of nice. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but that's what I took out of it. And then the actual scene in the hospital or retirement community, I'm not sure which it was, but with Yorkie in the bed on the respirator and being completely non-responsive and everything. It's such a beautiful and sad scene. Kelly kissing Yorkie's forehead is such a beautiful and heartwarming moment, and the actual set of the place that she's in, that Yorkie's in, is beautifully designed as well. It's very white and sterile. It's futuristic, but not too futuristic, which is exactly what you can describe pretty much everything about Black Mirror. But it's just a beautiful set to have this very big moment for this relationship at the core of the story play out. It's great. And then we actually meet Greg, Yorkie's quote unquote fiance, and it's funny, I haven't even mentioned him at all, because we do get that backstory with Yorkie early on. We get the explanation that she does have a fiance, and I didn't mention that before because it wasn't really that pertinent. That was more mystery driven than anything. It's not the way that it's not like it was presented in a way that I guess that's not fair. It wasn't. I was gonna say it wasn't presented in a way that made Yorkie and Kelly's relationship seem more taboo, or not taboo, but more like a secret that Yorkie was experimenting, or anything. It was just more of a throwaway thing that was more mysterious than anything. But anyway, when we actually meet Greg and Kelly talks to him, he delivers this big exposition dump that reveals the tragic backstory of Yorkie. And I didn't mind it as an exposition dump. I think that it was pretty necessary, but maybe it could have been done a little bit more organically, because, I mean, he's literally sitting at a table explaining everything about Yorkie's life to Kelly. And I think that maybe it would have been, I don't know, maybe it would have been a little bit better. I guess I don't know how they could have done that without tipping their hand, or tipping their, is that the expression, tipping your hand or tipping your hat? I don't know. Without showing their hand, if maybe Yorkie had explained to Kelly in bed, but maybe that would have been overdoing the emotional connection. I don't know. This is why I'm not a screenwriter. I comment on people's work. But Greg throws out like little tidbits here. He says that he and Yorkie talk on the comm box a lot. And you just get the sense that Greg, as a character, he's such a good person. Like, oh my God. Like he works in this place, and he wants to marry Yorkie so that she can go to San Junipero forever and pass over into San Junipero. And it's such a noble thing for a character to do to another person. It's really great. But at this point, we all know what's going to happen. We know that Kelly is going to marry her, and it's such a beautiful thing. And when it's done, or when it's revealed that that's what's going to happen, it's a very beautiful and emotional moment, and it makes the entire episode it really brings home the entire episode. It's incredible. And we also get a little peek at how they get to San Junipero. There's just this little like disc that they put on their temple that lights up, and that transports their mind to San Junipero. And I like the simplicity of that. It doesn't need to be explained anymore, or it doesn't need to be any more complicated than what we see, because it's not about the technology. This episode is not about that technology. This is about the characters, and we just get a very simple thing, and then I didn't think anything more of it about how they got to San Junipero. And the beachfront proposal, I mean, that brought tears to my eyes. It was just so beautiful. It's so great. And then the show just goes right into the wedding without even breaking like the music cues or anything. It's just, it's great. And the score in that scene is so simple and sincere. It's just a wonderful moment in this episode. And honestly, the episode could have ended right here. Like, it could have ended at that moment, and it still would have been my favorite episode. Like, actually, Yorkie on the beach watching the ocean and taking off her glasses and feeling the breeze, that would have been a wonderful ending to this episode. But the relationship itself needs its conflict, and we need that resolution, and we need the answer to the question of what is going to become of these two, and if they're going to live out their days on San Junipero or live out their eternity in San Junipero. And it's a rough conflict to end the episode. It's rough. Yorkie asking Kelly to pass over and stay in San Junipero with her is what this entire episode has been building toward. And Yorkie hasn't had the life experience that Kelly's had, so she can't comprehend what exactly Kelly is feeling, or she doesn't understand the conflict that Kelly has, or the life experience that Kelly brings with her to this dilemma that they have. And this is the moment where Yorkie's kind of naivete and age is shown. I guess age, lack of life experience, I should say. Because Yorkie, and this is so brutal, Yorkie tells Kelly that Kelly's husband was selfish, and it's so brutal, but it's perfectly in line with her character. And she's frustrated. She wants this woman that she loves to stay with her. And it just really compounds the idea that Yorkie is young and naive. And Kelly's response to that is amazing. It's maybe my favorite scene in the movie, wow, in the episode, because she talks about she was with her husband for 49 years, and they lost a child together when their daughter was I think in her 30s. And it's just, the acting in that scene is outstanding. And it comes from a place of genuine pain and this sense of just shock and hurt. And it also, we get the reveal that the reason that Kelly's husband didn't pass over into San Junipero is his reasoning was that he couldn't because their daughter missed out. And I don't know, just the way that is revealed, it's a gut punch. It's such a gut punch to me, because there is such a complexity to Kelly's emotional history and emotional place here, that you get the sense, you understand why she's so conflicted, because she hasn't cared for someone the way that she cares for Yorkie in a long time, and she lost the love of her life, the person that she was spending her life with. And not only that, but she lost her daughter too. And it everything about it is, that alone is so tragic and sad. But then you get the fact that her husband didn't want San Junipero because he wanted to be with their daughter. And to contrast that with Kelly not believing in heaven or the real afterlife or anything, she doesn't have that peace of mind to think that her husband and her daughter are somewhere together, spending time together, because she doesn't believe in that. And it's such a complex and incredible characterization. And it's just so tragic and sad. And it really kind of hammers home why it brings to light why there's such a conflict with Kelly about wanting to stay in San Junipero. And then, so after the fight, Kelly crashes the car, and I didn't quite get it, really. My understanding of it is that she's angry, upset, and she wants to dull the pain of the fight and the emotion that she's feeling. So she crashes. It's kind of the same as her wanting to just have sex with people and be a party girl in San Junipero, to kind of detach herself from the emotional side of things. I feel like that's what they were going for. That's my best guess, at least. Unless there's some other reason that I'm missing completely. That's as far as I can understand it. I do like the imagery though of Yorkie being there when Kelly crashes, and then Kelly just completely disappearing because it's the time is up for her in San Junipero. In that montage that comes after that, and this is, oh God, this episode's so good. The montage of Kelly getting more sick, and just hearing her wheeze, it's painful. It's painful to hear, and seeing that she's faced with her mortality, and that's kind of what makes her decide to pass over. I kind of think that the montage of her getting sicker and sicker, I feel like there wasn't enough to really, this is a terrible thing to say, it wasn't enough to get her to convince her to be with Yorkie, for me. I think that we just get like her realizing that she's doesn't have much time left, and it's kind of more of a timeliness than anything, deciding that in terms of her deciding to go to San Junipero. It's more, well, she's definitely coming to the end of it now, and so she kind of makes the choice to pass over because she's dying, and not because, no, that's not fair. I was gonna say because, and not because she wants to be with Yorkie. That's not fair, and that's not accurate. She makes the choice because she's dying, and she doesn't want to die. And that's fine. That's fine. It just, I don't know. I kind of wish there was a little bit more to her decision rather than a quick montage. But then the episode ends, and my God, the song "Heaven Is a Place on Earth" is so freaking perfect. Like, it is just so perfect, and it sends chills throughout my entire body. And I love that. I love that ending where we see, I assumed that it was pronounced Ticker Systems, the corporation that has all the servers and everything, but judging from the track listing on the soundtrack, I think it might actually be Tucker Systems. But anyway, we see a shot of the servers, and like my immediate reaction was just, God, I hope that place has like a dozen fail safes in place in case there's a power outage or something, because that would be just terrible. And I think that it's just absolutely beautiful that the final shot of Yorkie and Kelly is them dancing in slow motion. And I think that it's the perfect way to end this episode, because finally Yorkie's dancing and she's with someone she loves, and they're together, and it's just, it's such a beautiful episode. It's fantastic. I loved this freaking episode. Yeah, so anyway, my closing thoughts on this episode are that it's freaking beautiful, and it encompasses everything that I love about Black Mirror. I at no point wanted to leave San Junipero or these characters or their story. I felt so connected with them and connected with both their separate and joint journeys. And again, it encompasses everything I love about Black Mirror. It's a semi-futuristic thing, very science fiction driven, very emotionally. At the core, it's a very emotional story about characters and like character dynamics and relationships. It reminded me a little bit of 15 Million Merits, and it's really hard to rank it with amongst the rest of the episodes because I loved 15 Million Merits so much. But I honestly think that San Junipero might win out for my favorite episode of Black Mirror so far. It's just really spectacular and just astounding. And I mean, like, my last bit of notes on this episode is just good luck ever topping this Charlie Brooker and Annabelle Jones. Like, it's because this, I don't see how they can top it. I really don't. But this was fantastic, and hopefully they can do that. And hopefully they will accept that challenge. Okay, so to kind of wind down, this is obviously my review's over, but as I've been doing in the past reviews for these bonus episodes, Charlie Brooker and Annabelle Jones did an AMA on Reddit, and I kind of wanted to read some of the responses that pertain to San Junipero. So I'll do that, and then we'll end the episode here. Let's see. There was apparently a theory that Charlie Brooker had written the episode, the entire episode, based around a picture of two women in at an 80s arcade, standing in front of an arcade game, and their response was, sadly no, but that's the DVD cover sorted for the day it never comes out on DVD. Which is something I really liked. I thought that was kind of cheeky, because it's a Netflix show and they're not gonna. I doubt that they'll release it on Blu-ray. Oh, I wish they did. I wish that Netflix original series came out on Blu-ray with extensive special features like how HBO does. That's just a pet peeve of mine with this streaming, the era of streaming television. Let's see. So another question on the Reddit AMA that pertained to San Junipero was, someone said, I was wondering if you were ever tempted to drop in a darker ending for San Junipero, or was it always your intention to tell a much happier story in comparison to the majority of the other Black Mirror episodes? And the response was, it was the intention to vary the tone of the season. The ending just came out that way because we loved the characters and wanted to gift them a happy ending, which is great. And then another question, actually from someone with the username San Junipero, was, did you expect San Junipero to be a big deal not only within the LGBTQ community, but for everyone? I mean, every social network is going nuts with Kelly and Yorkie. You must know that. And his response was, we've been delighted by the response to it. We see it as a universal love story. The fact it's about two women is both significant and insignificant. Significant in that they get married in 1987, which wasn't possible at that time in reality, and that kind of chimed in with the whole theme of reliving your life and exploring possibilities afresh. And insignificant in that it's a love story between two people, so that it's been great to see a positive reaction from across the board. And I agree, that's great. And that's something I didn't really talk about that much in my review, but it's such a great episode because the emotion is so it's a great and important episode, obviously, but it's so universal, the relationship in it, that it's beautiful. But it does have significant social importance, and I think that it's a wonderful episode for that to carry that kind of message. And the last question on the Reddit AMA regarding San Junipero was, was Heaven is a Place on Earth the partial inspiration for San Junipero, or did someone just do an incredible job sourcing music for the episode? And the response was, I can't recall when it came into the process, but I was running and it came up on a Spotify 1987 playlist I'd put together, and I sort of went, fucking hell, that's perfect, but not out loud. And then I couldn't relax until I knew it was cleared. And that's great, because that it is seriously the perfect way, the perfect song for this episode. Yeah, it's fantastic. So that does it for the Reddit AMA and everything, and that does it for this bonus episode of Anthology, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. Thank you guys for listening, and next week or here in a couple days, actually, on the podcast, we'll have my review of, I don't even remember what episode of Twilight Zone I'm covering next time. Actually, we're coming up on the end of Season 1 of The Twilight Zone. A World of His Own is the next episode that's going to be coming out. It's going to be the end of Season 1. And once again, if you go to anthologypod.com/survey and give me your answers to your favorite, least favorite moments and episodes and everything about Season 1 of The Twilight Zone, go ahead and do that, and I'll read them on my end of season episode here in a couple weeks. And let's see if that. I think that about does it, guys. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Anthology, presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find more episodes at anthologypod.com, and you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or your preferred podcast app. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on iTunes. The more reviews I get, the higher the show will be ranked in iTunes search results, making it easier for people to discover it and grow the podcast. Of course, you can always email me your thoughts and feelings about the show to matt@obsessiveviewer.com. You can also tweet me at obsessiveviewer, like the Facebook page at facebook.com/anthologypod, or you can call and leave me a voicemail at 317-762-6099 for a chance to have it played on the show. If you like what you've heard here, I urge you to check out The Obsessive Viewer, a weekly movie and TV podcast I host with my friends Mike and Tiny. Also check out the Obsessive Viewer blog at obsessiveviewer.com, where I write movie reviews, TV reviews, and the occasional editorial about the business of entertainment. If you want even more obsessive content in your life, subscribe to the Obsessive Viewer subreddit at r/obsessiveviewer, and check out obsessivebooknerd.com, our sister site for book reviews, author spotlights, and a general celebration of reading. Finally, if you're philosophically curious, check out my friend Tiny's side project podcast, The Secular Perspective, which explores the concepts of faith, religion, and existence from the perspective of secular hosts. You can find that at thesecularperspective.com. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.